Deep beneath the mountain, the only sound was the steady tap of a young dwarf's hammer. Alara, an apprentice craftworker, spent her days in a quiet workshop, but her heart yearned for something more. That something was the legendary Heartstone of Aegis, a gem whispered to hold the power to bring lasting peace and harmony to her entire clan. By the end of our journey together, you will have discovered the secrets of the ancient Dwarven Halls and felt the profound calm of a true cozy fantasy sleep story. Alara knew that seeking it meant leaving the safety of everything she knew, risking not just her own standing, but the very stability of her people. She would have to venture into the silent, uncharted depths where no dwarf had walked for generations. What ancient guardians or forgotten melodies await in the darkness? I would love to know if you feel comfortable sharing where you are listening from and what the local time is for you right now. What does a place of perfect peace look like in your mind? The stone beneath her feet felt different here, less like solid rock and more like a vast, sleeping membrane. Alara moved with a painstaking slowness, her every breath held as she studied the floor ahead. This was the Whispering Corridors, a place she knew only from half-remembered apprentice tales. The faint, melodic runes carved along the walls glowed with a soft, persistent light, and she traced their curves with her eyes, translating their ancient song. A low hum meant solid ground. A slight dissonance in the stone song signaled a fragile tile that would not bear her weight. Her heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs, a stark contrast to the careful, deliberate pace of her movements. Each footfall was a decision, a silent prayer offered to the mountain itself. The whispers began as a gentle hiss, like wind through a cracked door, but soon they resolved into voices too soft to decipher, murmuring just at the edge of her hearing. They were not warnings of immediate danger, but something far more unsettling, echoes of long-faded conversations and forgotten laughter that twisted into sighs. They seemed to press in on her, questioning her presence, amplifying the sound of her own fear. Duty to her clan demanded she continue, but every instinct screamed for retreat into the known world of forges and lamplight. She closed her hand around the cool metal of her hammer, its familiar weight a small anchor in the sea of unnerving sound. With a final glance at a rune that shimmered with a clear, guiding note, she made her choice. Courage would have to be her compass now, not caution. Pressing forward, she felt the corridor itself respond. The path seemed to narrow and then widen, the whispers coiling around her like spectral vines. Just as the pressure felt unbearable, a glint of silver caught her eye from a nearly invisible crack in the wall. She carefully pried loose a small, rolled sheet of aged metal, an old map fragment depicting chambers and tunnels whose names were lost to time. It was a vital clue, a gift from the past, but her triumph was short-lived. The act of retrieving it sent a sharp echo ringing down the passage, and the whispers around her sharpened, coalescing into a single, clear tone of alert. Something had been listening, and now it knew she was here. The stakes of her quest were no longer abstract. They were as real as the sudden silence that fell. Then, from the darkness ahead, the last whisper faded away, replaced by a new sound, a soft, rhythmic tapping like distant, patient fingers on a drum. The patient tapping grew into a resonant, percussive heartbeat as Alara stepped into the cavern. Giant stone drums, each taller than 3 dwarves, stood in a silent circle around the chamber. Their surfaces were smooth and dark, etched with spiraling patterns that seemed to drink the light. Ahead, a sealed stone archway blocked her path, its surface blank and unyielding. She knew the lore. The old craftworker songs spoke of this place, the chamber of echoing drums. To pass, she had to play not a song of power, but one of rest, an ancient dwarven lullaby meant to soothe the mountain itself to sleep. Her fingers trembled at her sides. A single wrong note, a beat out of sequence, and the fragile equilibrium of the chamber could shatter, bringing the ceiling down upon her. The drums were not just stone, they were an instrument of profound sensitivity, and their echoes seemed to thrum in time with the anxious rhythm of her own pulse. She could feel the pressure of the mountain above her, a weight that felt suddenly precarious. She had the lullaby memorized from her earliest lessons, the notes translated from the runes in the whispering corridors. Her instincts screamed to pull out the map fragment, to double-check the sequence against the markings she had found. But in that moment of decision, she closed her eyes and let her hands rest on the cool, waiting surface of the first drum. She would trust the knowledge she had earned, the song that was woven into her very bones. Taking a slow, steadying breath, she began. The first tap of her hammer was a soft, questioning note that hung in the air. The second was more confident. She moved between the monolithic drums, her small frame dwarfed by their immensity, each strike a deliberate syllable in the stone lullaby. The drums answered her, their echoes layering and weaving together, creating a harmony that was both felt and heard. The vibrations traveled up through the soles of her boots, a deep, calming resonance. But when her focus wavered for a single moment, a flicker of doubt crossing her mind, her next strike landed with a slight, clumsy force. The drum responded with a dissonant, booming note. Instantly, a low rumble shuddered through the chamber, and a fine shower of dust and pebbles rained down from the darkness above. Her heart leaped into her throat. The mountain had groaned a warning. Swallowing her fear, she forced her breathing to slow, finding the rhythm of the song once more. She played on, her movements becoming fluid, a dance of precision and memory. As the final, resonant note faded into silence, the sealed archway began to glow with a soft, golden light. Without a sound, the massive stone slid sideways into the wall, revealing a dark passage beyond. A wave of relief, so profound it left her weak, need washed over her. She had done it. Yet, the faint tremors that still tingled in the stone beneath her feet were a stark reminder. This place was a delicate instrument, and her presence was a finger on its trigger. The way was open, but the silence that followed felt heavy, attentive. From the darkness ahead, a new sound called to her, the gentle, persistent murmur of flowing water. The crystal river cavern was close. The air itself changed, growing cool and carrying the clean scent of water on stone. Ilara stepped from the echoing drum chamber into the vast, vaulted space of the crystal river cavern. A shallow river, no wider than a dwarven table, meandered across the floor, its bed paved with countless crystals that glowed with a soft, internal light. Their gentle radiance cast shifting blue and silver patterns on the cavern walls, a silent, shimmering dance. The only path across was a line of broad, flat stones, just submerged beneath the water's surface. But this was no simple stream. The old tales called it the River of Song, and every ripple, Every drop of displaced water would ring out with a soft, musical chime. The entire cavern was a single, vast instrument, and she was an uninvited musician. Her heart, still calming from the drums, began to beat a little faster. Speed felt essential, a desperate urge to flee the echo of her earlier mistake, but haste here would be a louder alarm than any drum. She could feel the potential for discord humming in the air, a tension in the very light the crystals cast. Taking a slow, deliberate breath, she placed her first foot on the nearest stepping stone. The water swirled around her boot, and a single, clear note hung in the air, pure and beautiful. It was a sound of perfect peace, but it was also a beacon announcing her presence. Each step was a careful negotiation, a test of her balance and her will. She had to move with the fluid grace of a falling leaf, her weight shifting seamlessly from one foot to the other to minimize the disturbance. For a few precious moments, it worked. A soft, random melody accompanied her passage, and the crystals seemed to brighten in response, their light becoming a soothing, warm embrace that eased the tension from her shoulders. It was in that moment of growing confidence that her focus wavered. The toe of her boot dislodged a small, loose pebble from a stone, and it dropped into the water with a sharp plink. The sound it made was not a gentle chime, but a discordant, jarring note that shattered the cavern's harmony. The note echoed, bouncing off the walls with a harsh, metallic ring that seemed to go on forever. In its wake, the glowing river seemed to flinch. The light in the crystals flickered, and from within the water, faint, shimmering forms began to coalesce, like figures woven from mist and light. They were not threatening, not yet, but they were attentive, their presence a silent question hanging in the now still air. These luminous watchers, echoes of the hall's early caretakers, had been stirred from their quiet watch. A chill of apprehension ran through her. The urge to run, to scramble across the remaining stones, was almost overwhelming, but Alara forced herself to stop. She planted her feet firmly on the stone she occupied and closed her eyes, shutting out the unsettling shimmer in the water. She remembered the profound warning of the drums, the consequence of forcing her will upon this ancient place. Rushing now would only create more noise, more disruption. Harmony, not haste, was the only way forward. This was not a race, it was a negotiation. She waited, letting the discordant echo fade completely into a waiting silence. She realigned her thoughts, pushing fear aside and focusing only on the feeling of the cool stone beneath her feet and the rhythm of her own calm breath. When she opened her eyes again, her movements were slower, more deliberate than before. She was not just crossing a river, she was apologizing to it, showing respect for its delicate nature with every painless step she took. As she moved with this renewed reverence, the crystals responded. Their glow intensified once more, no longer just illuminating the main path, but pooling brightly against one wall of the cavern, revealing what she had missed entirely, a narrow, shadowed opening behind a curtain of glistening mineral deposits. It was a hidden side passage, a reward for her patience. The shimmering forms in the water slowly faded, their purpose fulfilled. With a final, careful step, she reached the far shore, her clothes damp, but her spirit intact. The crystals behind her pulsed with a soft, approving light, their collective radiance now clearly funneling toward the dark tunnel ahead, where the air grew still and carried a new, faint fragrance of aged stone and something else. something sweet and earthy. The sweet, earthy fragrance grew stronger, resolving into the distinct scent of stone rose and cool night air. Alara entered the garden of stone blooms, a cavern where the floor was a tapestry of crystalline flowers. Each blossom was carved from a different mineral, their petals looking as delicate as glass, and from their centers rose a soft, floral aroma that calmed her breathing. In the middle of the garden stood the largest bloom, its petals a shimmering, milky quartz, and at its heart lay the pollen she needed, a fine, silver dust that glowed with a gentle light. The old songs called it the heart's balm, a powder that could soothe agitated stone itself. She knew the danger. The beautiful thorns that curved protectively around each stem were not just for show. A single careless touch would trigger their defense. The entire garden seemed to hold a collective breath, the flowers trembling with an almost imperceptible vibration. She felt the old urge to hurry, to snatch the pollen and run, but the memory of the river's discord was a fresh lesson in her mind. Rushing would mean failure. Unshouldering her pack, she retrieved a small, soft bristled brush, a tool for dusting fine gem dust from intricate carvings. This was a task for a craftworker's patience, not an adventurer's haste. She took a slow step forward, and the nearest flowers tilted slightly toward her, their stony petals shifting with a soft, grating sound. They were aware. A sudden move, a sharp noise, and the garden would become a fortress of closing blooms and sharp thorns. An idea, born of instinct rather than memory, came to her. She began to hum, a simple, wordless dwarven lullaby her mother used to sing at the forge. The tune was low and steady, a vibration of calm. As the melody left her lips, the trembling of the stone blooms softened. They seemed to lean in, listening, their sharp thorns retracting just enough to grant her passage. She moved through them like a gentle breeze, her humming a constant, soothing thread connecting her to the semi-sentient garden. Reaching the central bloom, she worked with a painstaking slowness, her brush gently sweeping the silver pollen from the quartz petals into a small leather pouch. The flower remained open, its scent intensifying as if in approval, but as she moved to secure the pouch, the edge of her sleeve caught on a nearby stem. It was the lightest of touches, but it was enough. A single needle-sharp thorn pricked the thick leather of her tunic. Instantly, the flower snapped shut with a sound like cracking ice, and from its sealed petals puffed a cloud of faint gold mist. Alara stumbled back, but not before breathing in a wisp of the vapor. A wave of profound lethargy washed over her, her limbs growing heavy, and her thoughts turning slow and syrupy. It was not a hostile sleep, but a deeply inviting one, a promise of absolute rest that pulled at her very soul. She shook her head, fighting the delicious weight of the drowsiness. The garden's beauty was a shield, and its peace came with a price. Securing the pouch of pollen at her belt, she felt its slight weight as a new kind of responsibility. This was not just an ingredient, it was a key, a tool of calm she would need for the trials ahead. Pushing through the lingering drowsiness, she noticed a new sound, weaving its way through the floral scent. It was a faint, melodic humming, too structured to be the wind, and too soft to be a threat. It seemed to emanate from the cavern wall ahead, where a new archway stood open, beckoning her forward into a space that felt deeply still and reverent. The humming was a call, an invitation to the hall of ancestral murmurs. The melodic humming resolved into a chorus of soft, overlapping voices as Alara stepped into the hall of ancestral murmurs. The cavern was immense, its ceiling lost in shadow, and the air shimmered with the translucent forms of generations past. They were not phantoms of fear, but echoes of memory, each one murmuring a fragment of their life story into the still air. The sound was a tapestry woven from countless threads of joy, pride, and a deep, enduring feeling. To find her way, she had to listen, not just with her ears, but with her entire being, for one specific story hidden within the symphony of those who came before. The tale of the Heartstone's hiding place was here, but it was a single, clear note in a sea of gentle sighs. She closed her eyes, letting the waves of sound wash over her. A whisper spoke of a forge cooled forever, another of a grand hall fallen silent, each one a weight upon her heart. The collective feeling of her people was a tangible force, and with every passing moment, she felt her own spirit growing heavier, as if she were carrying their stories on her shoulders. Her quest for a gem began to feel small against this ocean of remembrance, and a profound empathy threatened to drown her focus. She had to find the balance between honoring their experience and holding fast to her purpose, a task that felt more fragile than navigating the crystal river. Then she heard it. A murmur, steady and clear, rose above the rest, speaking not of an end, but of a solemn hope. It told of a gem carried to the highest point within the mountain, to a place where the first and last light of day could touch it, the summit cavern. The echo described a journey of safeguarding, not of absence, and in that moment, Alara knew where she must go. But as the helpful murmur faded, the softer whispers rushed in to fill the silence, clinging to her like a cool mist. They seemed to ask for her to stay, to listen, to share their memory. The choice was stark. She could be consumed by the past, or she could carry its lesson forward. Opening her eyes, she turned slowly to face the shimmering assembly. She did not speak, but offered a deep, respectful nod, a craftworker's salute to those who came before. It was an acknowledgement of their journey, a promise that they were not forgotten. Then, with a resolve that felt newly forged, she turned toward the archway from which the humming had first called her. As she moved away, the murmurs did not cease, but they began to change, weaving together into a low, harmonious chant that was less a lament and more a song of guidance. It was a gift of strength, paid for with her empathy, and it pulled her forward toward a new sound, the gentle, metallic ringing of the bridge of Harmonious chimes. The gentle metallic ringing resolved into a chorus of soft, clear notes as Alara approached the bridge of Harmonious chimes. It was a slender arch of pale, polished stone, seemingly spun from moonlight, stretching over a chasm whose depths were lost in a soft, glowing mist. From its delicate rails hung countless wind chimes, each crafted from a different metal, and they swayed in a gentle, unfelt breeze, creating the serene melody that filled the air. To cross, she would have to become part of the music itself. The bridge was not merely a structure, it was a living instrument, and its stability depended on the harmony of her passage. Each chime was a pressure point, and her footsteps were the drumsticks. A step in perfect rhythm with the melody would keep the bridge firm and the song uplifting, but a single misstep would cause a chime to ring out in a sharp, dissonant clang, making the whole structure tremble beneath her feet. Her heart began to beat in a frantic, irregular rhythm that clashed with the chime's calm tempo. She could feel the immense empty space below, a void that seemed to pull at her, and the bridge felt impossibly narrow. Her anxiety was a tangible force, and with every nervous tremor that ran through her, she felt the bridge respond with a slight, unnerving sway. The chimes seemed to be listening to her mood as much as her movements. She took a first hesitant step, and a silver chime sang a pure, affirming note. But her second step was rushed, a product of fear, and her boot came down between the rhythms. A bronze chime below her rang out with a harsh, jarring sound. Instantly, the bridge shuddered violently, swaying to the side and throwing her off balance. She dropped to one knee, her hands gripping the cool, smooth rail as the dissonant note echoed around the chasm. The beautiful melody faltered, replaced by a tense, wavering hum. The drop below yawned, its misty glow suddenly feeling less comforting and more like a warning. This was not a test of strength, but of trust. She could not force her way across by watching her feet or calculating each step. The bridge was too responsive to her visible tension. Closing her eyes felt like an immense risk, a surrender to the vast emptiness around her, but it was her only choice. She had to stop fighting the music and let it carry her. Taking a deep, shaking breath, she shut out the dizzying view of the chasm and focused only on the sound. She let the melody wash over her, feeling its rhythm in her bones, in the pulse of her own blood. She stopped thinking and started listening, truly listening, until the song was no longer outside her, but within her. When she rose and took her next step, it was not a decision of the mind, but an instinct of the body. Her foot landed in perfect time, and the chime answered with a note so sweet it felt like a reward. Step by step, she moved across the arch, her body swaying gently with the bridge's natural resonance. The melody swelled, no longer just a sound, but a physical presence supporting her, each harmonious note strengthening the stone beneath her boots. The bridge was no longer an adversary, but a partner in a delicate dance. As she reached the solid ground of the far side, the final chimes rang out in a soft, cascading farewell. Their song softened into a whisper, a gentle breath of sound that seemed to curl through the air, pointing unmistakably toward a new opening in the cavern wall. From within, a soft blue-green glow pulsed in a slow, hypnotic rhythm, and the air carried a new, earthy scent of damp soil and growing things. The luminous fungi grove was waiting. The air grew thick with the scent of damp earth and living stone. Alara entered the luminous fungi grove, a cavern carpeted in a forest of softly glowing mushrooms. Some were a gentle, inviting green, pulsing with a light that seemed to soothe her tired eyes. Others were a brilliant, volatile blue, their caps looking taut and ready to burst. She kneaded the green spores, whispered to bring deep, untroubled rest, but the blue caps were a minefield of disorientation. Every step had to be measured, her body weaving through the dense growth with the care of a craft worker handling spun glass. The tension was a physical weight, a choice between gathering a tool for survival and triggering a reaction that could leave her lost and confused in the endless dark. Her hand went to the pouch at her belt, the silver heart's bomb pollen from the stone blooms. An idea, born of intuition, sparked in her mind. Perhaps the pollen, meant to soothe agitated stone, could calm the volatile nature of the living fungi. With painstaking slowness, she sprinkled a tiny amount of the glittering dust onto the cap of a nearby blue mushroom. The fungus seemed to sigh, its brilliant blue glow softening to a tranquil indigo, the tension visibly leaving its form. It was working. She could now move more freely, harvesting the soft green spores from their gentle hosts and carefully storing them in a small vial. But in her focus, the edge of her cloak brushed against an untreated blue cap she had missed. It reacted instantly, flaring with a blinding flash of light and releasing a cloud of sparkling, disorienting spores right into her path. She stumbled back, but it was too late. A wave of dizziness washed over her, the grove tilting and swaying around her. Her thoughts became muddled, her sense of direction dissolving into a confusing haze. The disorientation forced her to her knees, costing her precious time as she waited for her head to clear. As she knelt there, fighting the dizziness, she began to see a pattern in the way the fungi glowed. The pulses of light were not random, they were a sequence, a soft, rhythmic code that seemed to guide her gaze toward a darker, quieter part of the grove. It felt less like a trap and more like a test of her observation, a lesson in reading the mountain's quiet language. When the fog in her mind finally lifted, the grove's light had dimmed considerably, all its soft radiance now pooling like a river, pointing the way to a small, secluded alcove. From within that darkness, a new sound called to her, the soft, rhythmic dripping of water, a patient and inviting sound that promised a moment of true respite. The soft, rhythmic dripping of water drew her into a secluded alcove, a pocket of profound stillness carved from the living rock. A tiny spring welled up in one corner, its water trickling down a smooth stone face into a perfectly still pool. Here, the air was clean and cool, and the only sound was that patient, gentle drip, a metronome of peace. Her body ached with a deep weariness, every muscle pleading for respite, but her mind screamed in protest. To stop was to admit vulnerability, to waste precious moments when the Heartstone still lay ahead. The fear of what might be happening in the halls above without its influence was a constant, gnawing pressure. Yet, the memory of her stumble in the fungi grove was a stark reminder. A body pushed beyond its limits becomes a liability. She had to choose between the reckless urge to push forward and the wisdom of strategic recovery. Unstopping the vial of green spores, she made her decision. Trusting the alcove's offered sanctuary, she sprinkled a pinch of the glowing dust into the palm of her hand and breathed in its earthy, calming fragrance. A wave of profound relaxation washed over her, not the forced sleep of the stone bloom, but a natural, welcoming descent into rest. She settled against the smooth wall, the sound of the dripping water weaving a protective barrier around her dreams. They were not dreams of fear, but of memory, filled with the soft, wordless melodies of ancient dwarven lullabies. In her sleep, the tunes resolved into a clear, repeating refrain about a gem that did not command, but listened, a stone that held silence within its heart. She awoke what felt like a moment later, yet her body felt renewed, her mind sharp and clear, the lingering disorientation from the grove completely gone. The restorative power of the spores was a gift, but it came with a price. As she reached for her pack, she found the old metal map fragment. A faint mist from the spring had settled on it, and though she wiped it clean, some of the finer, inked lines had blurred, smudging the details of a crucial junction. The certainty of her path was now clouded. A flicker of concern rose, but was quickly quelled by the deep calm the rest had given her. She felt the passage of time, a subtle shift in the mountain's own rhythms, but she also felt a new strength. The dream melody echoed in her mind, a clearer guide than any smudged line on a map. Following the remembered tune, she left the safety of the alcove, the dripping spring fading behind her as a new, vast openness beckoned ahead, a space that felt less like a cavern and more like a piece of the night sky brought deep underground. The vast openness above her was not empty, but filled with a soft, distant light. Alara stood in the Starlit gallery, a cavern whose ceiling was a perfect replica of a night sky, each point of light a carefully placed crystal embedded in the rock. In the center of the domed ceiling hung 3 larger, darker stones, their surfaces smooth and waiting. The silence here was deep and expectant, and she knew the old craftworker tales were true. To find her way, she had to complete the picture. She had to align the 3 central stones to form the constellation, known as the Forge's Hammer. But there were no markings, no instructions carved into the walls, only the memory of her dream in the alcove, the melody that had resolved into a clear image of 3 stars in a specific, familiar pattern. She reached up, her fingers barely brushing the cool, smooth surface of the first stone. It shifted with a faint grating sound, and as it moved, the crystals around it flickered. She guided it into position, her mind holding the dream image like a template. The second stone slid more easily, clicking into place beside the first. A soft hum began to fill the chamber, a sound of gathering energy, but when she nudged the third stone, her confidence wavered for a split second. The alignment was off by a hair's breadth. Instantly, the hum ceased. The entire ceiling dimmed, the starlight crystals fading to a dull, ominous glow that barely pushed back the encroaching shadows. The cavern was plunged into a deep, humming twilight, the air growing thick and heavy. A cold dread gripped her. To be held here in a perfect, unending night was a more terrifying prospect than any chasm or guardian. She forced her breathing to stay even, closing her eyes against the oppressive dimness. She could not trust her eyes in the near darkness. She had to trust the memory in her hands. She recalled not just the image from her dream, but the feeling of the melody, its rhythm and flow. Letting that internal music guide her, she gently adjusted the third stone once more, rotating it with a delicate, precise touch. The moment it settled into its true position, a soft click resonated through the chamber. The humming stopped. For a heart-stopping second, nothing happened. Then, the 3 central stones began to glow with a warm, golden light. That light spread, flowing through the crystal stars around them, until the entire constellation of the Forge's Hammer blazed with brilliant clarity. From its central point, a single, solid beam of pure white light lanced down, striking the far wall of the cavern and illuminating a narrow, arched tunnel she had not seen before. The relief was so potent it made her knees weak, but as the beam held steady, she saw something within its light, a fleeting shadow of a massive, silent form standing guard before a distant, glowing entrance. The summit cavern was not merely a destination, it was protected. The final challenge would not be a puzzle of stone or light, but a test of will. The beam from the stars did not waver, pointing the way into the dark mouth of the Whisperwind Tunnel, where a new sound, a faint and constant sigh, promised the last leg of her journey. A constant, gentle sigh filled the narrow passage of the Whisperwind Tunnel, a sound that was neither wind nor voice, but something in between, The air itself moved in soft currents, carrying faint, fragmented whispers that brushed against her ears. Some promised an easier path to the left, others urged her to the right, their words melting into the sighing breeze before she could fully grasp them. Each fork in the tunnel presented a choice, and the whispers became a chorus of conflicting advice. To find the true way, she had to lean not just her body, but her entire attention into the subtle drafts. The correct path was not marked by silence, but by a whisper that carried a specific resonance, one that felt steady and clear amidst the chaotic murmurs. For a moment, a gentle, persuasive gust pushed against her shoulder, its whisper promising a wide, well-lit passage just ahead. She took a half step in its direction, her boots scuffing loose gravel near the tunnel's edge. The stone beneath her foot gave way, sending a shower of pebbles into a deep space she had not seen. She pulled back, her heart beating fast, the sudden shift a stark contrast to the thoughtful challenges behind her. The tunnel was not just a guide, it was a filter, testing her discernment as much as her balance. The whispers grew more insistent, pressing in from all sides, their voices layering until they felt like a living presence, crowding the narrow space. A cold knot of worry tightened in her stomach, threatening to cloud her judgment entirely. Then, she remembered the melody from her dream in the alcove, the clear, repeating refrain about the gem that held quiet. She closed her eyes, shutting out the dizzying effect of the dark and the confusing words. She focused only on the sound of the wind, filtering the noise until she could hear its underlying tone. And there it was, woven into the sighing air itself, the same soft, wordless melody. It was not a shout, but a hum, a thread of harmony that pulled gently but persistently from one specific direction. She tuned out all other promises and warnings, anchoring herself to that single, familiar tune. When she opened her eyes, her path was clear. She leaned into the breeze, carrying the melody, and the tunnel walls seemed to part for her, the way forward smooth and certain. The deceptive whispers faded behind her, their power broken. The wind itself settled, its force easing from a test into a gentle escort, its sigh now soft and approving. It ushered her out of the narrow stone passage and into a space that took her breath away, the gemstone meadow. The gemstone meadow stretched before her, a field of softly pulsing lights, embedded in a floor of deep, dark earth. Each stone was a different color, glowing with a gentle inner fire, but the ground between them looked soft and uncertain, ready to give way to anyone who misstepped. The only way forward was to walk from one gemstone to the next, but not every stone would accept her weight. She took a tentative step onto the nearest crystal, a pale amethyst. It remained firm and silent. The next, a piece of citrine, let out a low, dissonant hum the moment her boot touched it, and she felt it shift unsteadily beneath her. She pulled back quickly, her heart leaping into a frantic rhythm. The stones were listening, and they would only hold her if she found ones that resonated in harmony with her own calmest self. Her own anxiety was the challenge here. Each step had to be taken in time with the steady, reassuring beat of her own heart, a rhythm she could barely feel over the pounding in her ears. The ground gave a slight, ominous tremble, and the gems around her flickered, their collective light dimming by a noticeable degree. Time was not on her side. The meadow itself was growing unstable, and its guiding light was fading. She closed her eyes, fighting the rising panic. This was a test of inner quiet, not outer strength. Remembering the tool she had earned, she unstopped the vial of green spores from the fungi grove and took a small, careful breath of their earthy fragrance. A wave of cool tranquility washed through her, slowing her racing pulse and steadying her breath. Her heartbeat became a slow, dependable drum in her chest. She opened her eyes, the world now feeling sharper and more manageable. Listening to that internal rhythm, she stepped onto a green peridot stone. It answered her with a clear, harmonious hum that vibrated up through her legs, and its glow brightened, casting a wider pool of light. Step by deliberate step, she moved across the meadow, a dancer in a silent, luminous waltz. Each harmonious contact made the next gem pulse more brightly, as if the field itself was approving her passage. But halfway across, a flicker of doubt returned. What if the spore's effect wore off too soon? The thought made her next step hesitant, and though the stone held, it issued a warning crack that echoed softly in the vast space. The entire meadow shuddered, and several distant gems winked out entirely. The message was clear. She could not afford another moment of fear. She focused everything on the rhythm, on the memory of the dripping spring, and the dream melody, letting them guide her feet. The final gem, a large, clear quartz, blazed with such intense light as she approached that it nearly blinded her. It pulsed in time with her footsteps. Then with a final, brilliant flash, its light condensed into a single beam, pointing like a crystal finger toward a simple, unadorned archway in the cavern wall. The entrance to the summit cavern stood open, and from within, a profound and waiting silence flowed out to meet her. The door before her was a masterpiece of forgotten craft, a seamless wall of polished obsidian, etched with a constellation of stone keys. Each key was a different size and shape, protruding slightly from the surface, and the only way forward was to play them in a perfect, silent sequence. Ilara stood perfectly still, her own breathing the only sound. She remembered the rhythm of the drums, the harmony of the chimes, the patience of the stone blooms. This was the final test, a symphony of all she had learned. Her first touch was a whisper, a single tap on a long, slender key. It did not make a sound her ears could hear, but a deep, resonant echo answered from within the stone of the door itself, a vibration she felt in her bones. She waited, listening to that echo fade, and then played the next. The sequence unfolded not as a memorized song, but as a felt conversation with the mountain, a call and response built on trust. For a moment, a flicker of doubt made her hesitate, her finger hovering over a key whose shape felt unfamiliar. The memory of the bridge's sudden shudder flashed in her mind. Fear was the true lock here. She closed her eyes, found the steady rhythm of her own calm heart, and let her hands move with a craftworker's instinct. The final note in the sequence was the lightest touch of all. A wrong strike now would disrupt the intricate locks, and a low, resonant tone already rumbled from the other side of the door, a reminder of the presence that waited. But her touch was true. The great obsidian door slid sideways into the wall without a single grating sound, revealing the cavern beyond. The air that flowed out was ancient and still, and in the vast darkness, a single point of light pulsed with a soft, inviting warmth. The Heartstone glowed in the distance, a promise kept, but the low resonance had not faded. It had simply been waiting for her to enter. Taking a deep breath, she stepped across the threshold. The guardian was a figure carved from the mountain's own soul, a being of living granite that stood between her and the softly pulsing Heartstone. It did not move, but its sheer presence was a wall, and the low resonance that had greeted her entrance now vibrated in the air like a held breath. Every instinct, honed by the long and careful descent, urged her to rush past it, to finally reach the gem she had given so much to find. Her hand twitched toward her hammer, the old, reliable tool of a craftworker. But the memory of the river of songs, discord, and the bridge of harmonious chimes was a clear lesson. Force would be met with force, and this silent sentinel would not be challenged, only respected. The true test was not to defeat the guardian, but to understand it. She thought of the silver pollen, the heart's balm meant to soothe agitated stone. She remembered the green spores, a gift of rest from the living grove, and she felt the weight of the ancestral murmurs, the respect she had shown to the echoes of those who came before. These were not merely collected items, they were proof of her journey's intent. Slowly, with movements as deliberate as her steps across the gemstone meadow, she unslung her pack. She did not look at the glowing Heartstone, but kept her gaze lowered toward the guardian's stone feet. First, she sprinkled a pinch of the silver pollen onto the floor before it. The faint, glittering dust settled, and the low resonance in the air softened by a single, perceptible degree. Next, she uncorked the vial of green spores, allowing their clean, earthy fragrance to drift toward the silent figure. The deep rumbling ceased entirely, replaced by a waiting stillness. Finally, she bowed, a deep, formal craftworker's salute of honor, offering her respect not as a demand, but as a gift. For a long moment, nothing happened. The tension was a physical weight on her shoulders. Then, the guardian shifted. It was not an aggressive movement, but a slow, deliberate step to the side, clearing the path to the Heartstone. A low, approving hum emanated from its stone chest, a sound that was both an acknowledgement and a blessing. The immediate challenge had passed, but a new one emerged. The Heartstone's glow intensified, its light no longer just a soft pulse, but a rhythmic, compelling call that seemed to sync with the beat of her own heart. The guardian's hum wove itself into that light, becoming part of the stone's ancient melody. It was not merely an object to be taken, it was a presence that wished to be understood. The final test would not be of her strength or her cleverness, but of her heart. The melody pulled her forward, inviting her to step into the full radiance of the gem and discover if she was worthy of the peace it promised to bring. The Heartstone pulsed before her, a slow, deep rhythm of light and sound that seemed to echo from the very center of the world. To simply reach out and take it felt like an intrusion, a disturbance of something living and aware. The only way forward was to join its song, to become a single, harmonious note within its ancient melody. Ilara closed her eyes, letting go of the immense pressure of the cavern and the overwhelming presence of the gem. She focused everything on her own breathing, drawing air in and letting it out in a slow, steady tempo that matched the stone's radiant pulse. A soft, wordless hum rose from her throat, tentative at first, then growing in confidence as she sought to weave her own simple vibration into the complex symphony of the Heartstone. For a long, suspended moment, it worked. The gem's light brightened, swelling with a warm, golden radiance, and it began to drift gently from its pedestal, floating toward her open hands as if drawn by an invisible thread. But a flicker of triumphant excitement, a sudden spike of pure joy, broke her concentration. Her breath hitched, and her hum wavered for a single, discordant note. Instantly, the Heartstone's light flickered, and a tremor ran through the cavern, shaking loose a rain of dust and small stones from above. The guardian behind her shifted, its low hum taking on a note of concern. The stakes were clear. A true break in the harmony could bring the entire summit down upon them. This was not about claiming a prize. It was about proving she was worthy of its trust. She fought the exhaustion that pulled at her limbs and the giddy fear that threatened to shatter her focus. She could not force this connection. She had to become the connection. Drawing upon a well of calm she did not know she possessed, she let her memory guide her. The steady rhythm of the echoing drums, the gentle chime of the crystal river, the patient melody from her dream in the alcove, all the quiet songs of the mountain began to surface in her mind. She wove them together, her hum becoming a tapestry of all she had learned and respected on her journey. It was no longer just a sound, but an offering, a story told in vibration. As her internal melody aligned perfectly with the Heartstone's own, the gem responded. Its flickering ceased, and its light stabilized, not as a blinding flash, but as a deep, unwavering glow that filled the cavern with a gentle warmth. The tremors in the stones stilled. The Heartstone completed its gentle drift, coming to rest softly in her waiting palms. It was cool and surprisingly light, and as it settled, the low hum from the guardian faded into a contented sigh. A profound, peaceful silence descended, a quiet so deep and complete it felt like a blanket, soothing the very air. The Heartstone rested in her pack, a gentle warmth against her back that pulsed in a slow, steady rhythm. As Alara turned from the summit cavern, the obsidian door sealing silently behind her, the first thing she noticed was the change in the air. The Whisperwind tunnel, once a confusing chorus of conflicting advice, now sighed with a single, melodic thread that clearly guided her steps. The gem's influence was immediate, a calming aura that soothed the ancient mechanisms of the halls. Where she had once tread with painstaking care, the path now felt welcoming, the very stone seeming to recognize the purpose she carried for them all. Her journey back through the gemstone meadow was a silent, luminous procession. Each crystal she stepped on glowed with a sustained, friendly light, their collective radiance forming a steady path without a single flicker of discord. The bridge of Harmonious chimes swayed gently in a soft, unfelt breeze, its music a quiet, celebratory fanfare for her passage. She felt the eyes of the mountain upon her, not as a judgment, but as a watchful, hopeful presence. This ease, however, brought its own quiet tension. The weight in her pack was not a physical strain, but a profound responsibility. Every peaceful step was a testament to the stone's power, and with that came the fear of a single misstep, a moment of carelessness that could disrupt the delicate balance she now upheld. She moved with a deliberate, unhurried pace, honoring the peace the halls offered her, ensuring the Heartstone's energy remained as stable as the deep bedrock. The importance of her safe return was etched into her mind with every beat of her heart. The future of her clan, the promise of lasting harmony, all rested on her shoulders and the quiet gem in her pack. She could not rush, for haste had been the enemy at every turn. As she entered the familiar stretch of the whispering corridors, the murmurs that had once been so unsettling now rose around her like a gentle farewell, their echoes weaving into a soft song of blessing for the journey home. The whispers that had once been a test of her resolve now sang a gentle song of gratitude. Ilara walked the whispering corridors with the Heartstone's warm pulse a steady rhythm against her back, and the path ahead was no longer a puzzle of fragile tiles and dissonant echoes. Its light, a soft golden radiance, flowed from her pack to illuminate the stone floor, clearly marking the safe way forward. The runes along the walls glowed with a brighter, more constant light, and the murmurs in the air resolved into ancient, wordless melodies that felt like a blessing. The journey that had once demanded such painstaking care now felt swift and welcoming, the very distance seeming to contract in the presence of the gem's soothing energy. She could feel that energy seeping into the rock around her, a palpable calm that settled the mountain's ancient anxieties. Yet, she did not allow this newfound ease to make her careless. Her steps, while confident, were still measured, her senses attuned to the subtle shifts in the stone beneath her feet. The halls were peaceful, but they were still a living entity, capable of unexpected change. In response to the friendly echoes, she began to hum, weaving her own quiet voice into their chorus. It was an active participation, a conscious choice to strengthen the bond she had forged. Each harmonious note she offered seemed to solidify the piece, and as she moved, the corridors began to hold onto the light, the runes casting a permanent, gentle glow that promised this change would endure. The stakes of her safe return were no longer a burden of fear, but a quiet responsibility she carried with pride, each step a confirmation that her quest had truly begun to heal the mountain. The grateful whispers around her slowly began to blend, their melodies transforming into the deep, resonant, and celebratory rhythm of the chamber of echoing drums. The deep, percussive heartbeat of the chamber of echoing drums swelled to meet her, but this time it was not a test. The giant stone instruments played a spontaneous, joyful symphony, their resonant booms and soft taps weaving into a rhythm of pure celebration. The very air vibrated with a welcome so profound it brought unexpected tears to her eyes. Ilara laughed, a soft sound lost in the magnificent noise, and without a second thought, she raised her hammer. She did not play the complex lullaby of before, but a simple, thankful rhythm, a few clear beats of gratitude offered back to the mountain that had tested and trusted her. Her small contribution did not disrupt the music, it amplified it, the drums answering with a deeper, warmer tone that made the chamber floor feel unshakably solid beneath her feet. A new warmth pulsed against her back, a direct, rhythmic answer from the Heartstone in her pack. The gem was resonating with the drum's energy, its light brightening in time with the music. For a moment, the joy was so complete, she felt a powerful pull to stay, to lose herself in this hard-won celebration. But the same pulse was a reminder, a gentle tug on her spirit. Her clan was waiting, their need a quiet, persistent hum in the back of her mind that even this glorious noise could not drown out. She could not linger, no matter how sweet the moment. With a final, deliberate tap that rang out like a clear, closing bell, she stilled her hammer. The drums continued their symphony, but the intensity softened, as if acknowledging her choice. The positive response from the halls was a confirmation more powerful than any spoken word. The stable, vibrant energy in the stone, proving the Heartstone's influence, was already weaving itself into the mountain's foundations. As she turned to leave, the drum's mighty music began to gently fade, its echoes blending seamlessly into a familiar, softer sound from the passage ahead, the gentle, melodic chiming of the crystal river. The crystal river sang a different song for her return. Its gentle chimes no longer felt like a delicate alarm system, but a chorus of welcome, each ripple producing a note of pure, harmonic clarity. With the Heartstone's warmth against her back, the entire cavern responded, the crystals in the riverbed glowing with a deep, sustained light that painted the walls in brilliant, shifting sapphire and silver. Alara stepped onto the submerged stones, and this time, her feet found a perfect, natural rhythm. There was no need for painful hesitation. Every movement flowed into the next, her passage creating a spontaneous and serene melody that seemed to celebrate her success. The water itself appeared clearer, each pebble and crystal facet visible in the radiant light, as if the river had been washed with starlight. For a breathtaking moment, she allowed herself to simply be within the beauty, to feel the music vibrate through the soles of her boots and soothe her tired spirit. Yet, the very perfection of the scene was a reminder of its fragility and its purpose. This piece was a glimpse of what could be, a promise that awaited fulfillment beyond the mountain. She could not linger in this underground sanctuary, while her clan above lived without its grace. As she reached the midpoint of the river, she stopped on a broad, flat stone and knelt, letting her fingers brush the surface of the luminous water. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice soft but clear, a genuine offering of gratitude to the living heart of the cavern. The river answered instantly, the crystals around her flashing in a gentle, synchronized pulse, and the chiming melody swelled into a brief, triumphant phrase. This immediate, positive response filled her with a powerful surge of hope. The Heartstone was not just a tool, it was a catalyst, and its influence was already weaving a stronger, more vibrant harmony through the ancient halls. The river's song then softened, its collective light coalescing into a clear, bright path that led her gaze directly to the cavern's far exit. The melodic chiming gently guided her forward, its notes blending seamlessly with a new, overwhelming fragrance that poured from the tunnel ahead, the rich and heady perfume of the garden of stone blooms in full, glorious flower. The rich perfume of fully bloomed stone roses filled the air, so potent it was a taste on the tongue. Alara stepped into the garden of stone blooms and caught her breath. The crystalline flowers, which had once trembled at her approach, now stood open and radiant, their petals spread wide in a silent, glorious chorus. Their collective scent washed over her in a visible wave of golden pollen, and a profound calm settled deep into her bones, easing the last remnants of tension from her journey. As she walked the now clear path, she reached out, her fingers gently brushing the cool, smooth surface of a quartz bloom. In response, the entire garden seemed to sigh, the flowers leaning toward her in a unified, graceful arc, their sharp thorns having withdrawn completely into their stems. It was a blessing, a silent acknowledgement of the peace she carried. A deep sense of accomplishment warmed her, a desire to linger in this beautiful, transformed space and simply rest. But the steady, warm pulse against her back was a quiet drum, counting the moments until her clan could share in this serenity. She could not stay. With careful, grateful hands, she used her brush to gather a small amount of the enhanced, glowing pollen into her pouch. It was an act of foresight, a craftworker's instinct to preserve a tool of such profound calm for whatever the future might hold. This vibrant, welcoming garden was the final proof she needed. The halls were no longer a challenge to be overcome, but an ally rejoicing in her success. The sweet, heavy scent of the blossoms seemed to guide her forward, pulling her gently toward the next archway, from which the once melancholy murmurs of those who came before had softened into a chorus of deep, contented sighs. The ancestral murmurs that had once spoken of quiet and transition now wove a tapestry of pure gratitude. Ilara walked through the hall of ancestral murmurs, and the shimmering forms no longer pressed upon her with the weight of memory. Their voices rose in a chorus of soft praise and gentle blessing, each echo telling a story not of an end, but of a legacy fulfilled. The very air felt lighter, humming with a joyful energy that eased the last vestiges of weariness from her soul. She paused for only a moment, letting the wave of their approval wash over her, a profound validation that her quest had meaning far beyond her own understanding. Their hope was a tangible force, and the unity they spoke of felt like a promise, already taking root in the stone around them. Yet, even as her heart swelled with emotion, she kept her gaze fixed on the archway ahead. The Heartstone's steady pulse against her back was a quiet, insistent reminder that this piece was not yet complete. Her clan was waiting. She could not stay, no matter how beautiful the transformation. With a deep, respectful breath, she offered a silent vow to the assembly of light, a promise to carry their hope into the world above and honor their legacy with every action to come. This bond with her heritage, now strengthened into an unbreakable thread, filled her with a solemn strength. The spirit's joyful farewell was the final confirmation she needed, sealing her purpose and magnifying the immense responsibility she now carried as the bearer of peace. Their grateful murmurs began to soften, blending together and then fading completely, replaced by the distant, harmonious chiming of the bridge, a familiar and welcoming sound calling her back to the path home. The bridge of harmonious chimes sang a different song for her return, a triumphant melody that swelled with gentle, celebratory notes. Ilara stepped onto the pale stone arch without a moment of hesitation, her feet finding a perfect, natural rhythm with the music. The chimes swayed in a soft, unfelt breeze, their ringing clear and uplifting, and the bridge itself felt solid and welcoming beneath her boots, a trusted pathway home. The chasm below, once a dizzying void of intimidating depth, now seemed merely a soft, glowing mist, its presence no longer a threat, but a beautiful part of the mountain's vast design. She moved with a fluid grace she had not possessed on her first crossing, her steps a confident dance in time with the harmonious symphony. This was no longer a test, but a coronation of her growth. Yet, even within this secure and joyful crossing, a part of her mind remained watchful. She did not rush or let her focus drift completely, knowing that the true end of her journey waited not here, but in the halls of her clan. The stability of the bridge was a powerful symbol of how deeply she had integrated the mountain's lessons, but it was not the final goal. As she reached the solid ground of the far side, the chime's triumphant song softened, fading into a gentle, lingering hum that seemed to curl around her in a final embrace. Their collective light dimmed, all of it flowing like a river of soft radiance toward the familiar entrance of the luminous fungi grove, whose gentle, blue-green glow pulsed in a slow, inviting rhythm from the tunnel ahead. The luminous fungi grove breathed with a soft, synchronized light, its blue and green caps pulsing in a slow, unified rhythm. The air itself was thick with the clean scent of damp earth and the faint, sparkling dust of tranquil spores. With every breath, Ilara felt a wave of serene clarity wash over her, easing the last traces of fatigue from her limbs. The once volatile blue caps were now calm, their glow a deep, peaceful indigo, and the entire cavern felt less like a trial and more like a sacred haven, a place of deep and earned rest. New clusters of fungi, delicate and intricately patterned, had sprung up along the path she had taken, their light harmonizing perfectly with the established growth. It was a living testament to the Heartstone's influence, a quiet celebration of the balance she had helped restore, a powerful longing to linger here, to simply sit and breathe in this perfected peace, tugged at her heart. But the same tranquil air that soothed her also sharpened her sense of duty. The grove was safe, it was whole, and her clan was not. The urge to gather more of the enhanced spores was a craftworker's instinct to preserve such a valuable tool. Her hand even drifted toward her empty vial, but she let it fall back to her side. Taking more would be an act of doubt, a lack of trust in the grove's own renewed vitality, and in the lasting power of the gem she carried. This restraint felt like a final, quiet lesson from the mountain itself. True guardianship meant knowing when to take and when to let be. The grove's profound peace was the ultimate confirmation. The Heartstone's calming energy was weaving itself into the very fabric of the deep halls, and the path home now felt wonderfully, tangibly close. As she moved toward the exit, the fungi seemed to understand. Their synchronized pulsing slowly dimmed, not in dismissal, but in a respectful, gradual farewell, their collective light gently funneling to illuminate the tunnel that led upward. The way was clear, and the familiar, comforting sounds of active forges and bustling dwarven life began to whisper just at the edge of her hearing. The final upward tunnel felt like a welcoming hand, guiding her home. Ilara climbed with a steady rhythm, the Heartstone's warm glow illuminating the worn stone steps. With every breath, she drew in the faint, familiar drafts of outside air, a scent of pine and cold wind that quickened her pulse. The journey back through the deep halls had been a procession of peace, but this last ascent was different. The tunnel itself seemed to shorten before her, the friendly echoes of the mountain whispering encouragement at her back. Yet the gem in her pack responded to the approaching world, its steady pulse quickening into a flutter of anticipation against her spine. It could feel the vastness of the sky, the life of her clan, and its energy mirrored her own mix of exhilaration and deep weariness. The urge to scramble up the last few lengths was a physical pull, a deep need to see the forge fires and familiar faces. But she remembered the cost of haste at the Crystal River, the near difficulty on the bridge. To rush now would be to dishonor every careful step that had brought her here. She planted her feet firmly, pausing to take several long, deep breaths, drawing the cool air deep into her lungs. She had to emerge not as a breathless messenger, but as a calm and worthy bearer of the peace she carried. The future of her entire clan, the promise of harmony that had faded to a faint hope, rested on these final, momentous steps. She would not disappoint them at the threshold. A soft, gray light filtered down from above, and the distant, comforting sounds of hammers on anvils and raised dwarven voices greeted her ears, growing clearer with every beat of her heart. The familiar sense of forged smoke and warm stone washed over her as Ilara stepped from the tunnel into the vast central cavern of her clan. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. The rhythmic clang of hammers faltered, and every eye turned toward her, widening at the gentle, golden light pulsing from her pack. A path cleared through the crowd of her people as she walked to the central forge, the great anvil standing silent and waiting. With a deep, steadying breath, she lifted the Heartstone from its wrappings. Its light flared, not with aggression, but with a soft, welcoming warmth as she placed it gently upon the cold iron. The moment it touched the forge, a profound change swept through the cavern. A wave of visible calm radiated from the stone, a serene energy that flowed through the air and into the very rock beneath their feet. The tense lines on weathered faces softened, and anxious murmurs transformed into soft, joyful exclamations of wonder and relief. Shoulders that had been hunched with worry relaxed, and for the first time in generations, a true, deep quiet settled over the bustling hall, a quiet filled not with absence, but with peace. Ilara stood before her clan, her own heart swelling with a complex mix of pride and a sudden, heavy understanding. The cheers and grateful looks were a balm to her weary spirit, but they also cemented the immense responsibility now resting on her shoulders. She was no longer just the apprentice who had left. She was the one who had returned with their future in her hands. As the clan elder stepped forward, his eyes shining with unspoken emotion, Ilara did not boast. She bowed her head respectfully. The guidance was not mine alone, she said, her voice clear and steady. The ancient halls themselves showed the way, and the whispers of our ancestors sang the path. The honor belongs to the mountain, and to all who came before us. This act of humility did not diminish her achievement. It magnified it, weaving her individual courage into the greater tapestry of their shared heritage. In that moment, her transformation was complete. The young craftworker was gone, replaced by a guardian, a living bridge between the deep magic of the mountain and the daily life of her people. The stakes of her journey had been the survival of their clan, but the reward was this, a palpable unity that filled the air like a sweet fragrance. As the Heartstone's light settled into a constant, gentle glow, a soft, ambient melody began to weave through the cavern, an echo of the harmonies from the deep halls. And in the warm, peaceful quiet, dwarves gathered closer, their voices low and reverent, already beginning to share the first tales of the apprentice who walked the whispering corridors and returned with the heart of the mountain. The melodic drumming began not as a roar, but as a soft, resonant heartbeat that matched the pulse of the Heartstone itself. Dwarves gathered in a wide circle around the central forge, their faces illuminated by the gem's gentle glow and the warm light of shared lanterns. This was no raucous feast, but a quiet celebration of harmony, where stories were the main course and the music was a tapestry woven from memory and hope. Ilara sat among them, the focus of every grateful gaze, yet she felt a profound connection to the circle, not a separation from it. When it was her turn to speak, she did not boast of her courage or the prize she had won. Instead, she recounted the lessons the mountain had taught her. She spoke of the crystal river and how a single discordant note could shatter peace, and of the bridge of harmonious chimes, where trust in the music was the only true support. Her voice was steady as she described the quiet moments, the weight of the ancestral voices, and the uncertainty of the shimmering gemstone meadow. She shared these challenges not to highlight her own endurance, but to illustrate the virtues of patience, respect, and inner quiet. With each tale she shared, a soft ripple of understanding passed through the clan. Dwarves who had spent their lives focused solely on the forge and the familiar began to see the deep halls not as an empty space, but as a place of wonder and ancient wisdom. The Heartstone upon the anvil seemed to respond to this shift in feeling, its soft golden glow brightening perceptibly with every story, as if nourished by the shared understanding. Ilara watched this happen with a quiet pride, a deep satisfaction that had nothing to do with personal glory. She enjoyed the warmth of the celebration, the laughter and the music, but her mind kept drifting back to the profound solitude of her journey. The memory of that stillness and the immense responsibility she had carried alone kept her humble and grounded amidst the praise. It was in that reflective state that a new purpose crystallized within her. The knowledge of the halls could not rest with her alone. As the celebratory drumming softened, transitioning into a slow, familiar lullaby, she made a decision. She would begin to teach the younger dwarves, the curious apprentices with wide eyes, about the wonders she had witnessed. She would show them how to listen to the stone and read the light, ensuring that the hard-won peace and the ancient knowledge would endure for generations to come. This decision cemented her new role, no longer just the bearer of the stone, but its guide and keeper. The stakes of her journey had now evolved. The survival of the clan was assured, but its cultural soul needed nurturing. As the celebration wound down and dwarves began to murmur their good nights, preparing for a deep and untroubled rest, the gentle lullaby wove through the hall, a promise that the harmony would last. That first night of peace was unlike any Ilara had ever known. Back in her own workshop, the familiar scent of oiled leather and cold stone was now underscored by the Heartstone's gentle hum, a constant, soft vibration that drifted from the central cavern. She lay in her cot, listening to the new symphony of the halls, the rhythmic, contented snores of her clan, and the distant, harmonious echoes that now sang through the stone instead of whispering warnings. It was a lullaby woven from security itself, and she slept a sleep without edges or fear, a deep and healing rest. In her dreams, she did not relive the trials, but walked the quiet passages as a guardian, her hand resting on cool, calm rock, feeling the mountain's steady breath as if it were her own. She awoke with the first hint of gray light, her body completely refreshed, yet her mind was already clear and focused. The vivid memory of the deep halls imprinted upon her like a second set of bones. A profound contentment filled her, but it was a vigilant sort of peace, one that understood its own fragility. She knew that the balance she had fought for was not a permanent state to be won and forgotten, but a living relationship that required constant, gentle attention. A simple, powerful vow solidified within her as she rose. She would not let the halls return to silence and mystery. She would walk their paths regularly, not as a questing hero, but as a respectful visitor, listening to their needs and reinforcing the bond between her people and the mountain's soul. Her personal journey was over, but her lifelong duty had truly begun, a commitment to protect the bright future now dawning for her clan. As the soft, golden light from the central forge began to brighten with the approaching day, the Heartstone's steady hum wove seamlessly with the first clear notes of morning bird song from the world above, a perfect harmony signaling a new chapter for them all. The Heartstone's glow swelled in Ilara's hands, a wave of soft, golden light that washed over the assembled clan. You could see the change ripple through the cavern, a visible sigh of relief that softened furrowed brows and eased the tension from stooped shoulders. A deep, resonant quiet descended, not the silence of emptiness, but a peace so profound it felt like the mountain itself was finally exhaling after centuries of holding its breath. In that luminous moment, Alara understood her quest in a new way. It had never been about fetching a powerful object. It was a transformation, a journey that had reshaped an anxious apprentice into a living bridge between her people and the soul of their home. The gem was a catalyst, but the true magic was the courage to seek it and the wisdom to bring its peace back home. Looking out at the faces of her clan, calm and united, she made a quiet vow deep within her heart. Her life would now be dedicated to this peace. She would become the guardian of the Heartstone and the keeper of the stories, the one who would ensure the lessons of the whispering corridors and the echoing drums were never forgotten. This was not an ending, but a beginning, a promise to nurture the harmony she had fought so hard to find, so that generations to come would know the strength found in quiet courage and the unity born from a single, shared hope. The Heartstone found its permanent home in the central forge, its core pulsing with a light that never dimmed. A soft, ambient melody now wove through the Dwarven Halls, a constant reminder of the harmony restored deep within the mountain. This was not a fragile piece, but one rooted in the very bedrock, a quiet song that settled arguments before they could begin and turned anxious thoughts into focused, creative energy. Alara, once the hesitant apprentice, now moved through her clan with a quiet confidence that drew others to her. Her greatest joy was found in the circle of young learners, their faces upturned as she taught them not just to strike metal, but to listen to its song. She showed them how to feel for the resonant point in a stone and to rid the stories told by the shifting light in the caverns. Under her guidance, the deep halls were no longer a place of fearful legend, but a source of wonder and ancient wisdom. On quiet days, she would still descend into the serene depths, not as a questing hero, but as a respectful visitor. She would sit by the crystal river, now perpetually chiming its gentle tune, or walk through the garden of stone blooms, its fragrance a sweet, calming presence. These journeys were a reaffirmation, a way to listen to the mountain's heartbeat and ensure the bond she had forged remained strong. Her personal story had become inseparable from the history of her people, a new thread woven into the ancient tapestry of their clan. The legacy she left was not one of loud conquest, but of quiet courage and profound respect, a whisper of tranquility that would echo through the stones for generations to come, a permanent lullaby for the heart of the mountain.